Members, officers and members of the general public that are joining us, welcome to the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 17th of October 2022. My name is Councillor Shane Bartlett. I'm Chairman of this Council, and the officers attending are Mr Selgren, Executive Director of Place, and Mr Mayor, Director of Legal and Democratic, and Ms Watson, Senior Democratic Services Officer. Other officers will be introduced as required during the meeting.
You just said you were Chair of the Council. Oh, just Chair of the
My apologies. Getting ideas above my station. Chairman of the Place and Resources Committee, just to clarify. So if I can move to... If I can just remind members to be aware of when they're using their microphones, if they could speak into the microphone, please, and ensure that they turn them off when they finish speaking. Thank you. We'll move to item 1 on the agenda for apologies. Ms Watson.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies from Councillors Andrews, Gorringe and Trite.
Thank you. And if I move to agenda item 2, the minutes. To confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of July 2022. Does anybody have any points of the minutes they wish to raise? In which case, can I ask for a proposal, please? Thank you, Councillor Roberts. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Took. All those in favour? Thank you, members. Move to item 3, declarations of interest. Does any member have a declaration of interest? Okay. Thank you, members. Item 4, for Chairman's update on the land charges update provided by Ms Evans. We received an update about land charges service response times at our July meeting. I have received a further and progress update as follows. During August, the response times reduced to an average of 12 working days. This has increased slightly to an average of 13 working days in September, but is still down from 16 working days in May. The reduced response times have been achieved despite the impact of staff absences due to annual leave and managed vacancies in the team. The response time published on the Dorset Council website is 15 average working days, and this will continue to be updated. The number of search requests received since April 2022 have increased from search numbers earlier in the year. They continue to be much higher than pre-pandemic and are very similar to, and sometimes more than, the search numbers for the same months in 2021 when the stamp duty holiday was in place. For example, search numbers in April 2022 were 865 compared with 803 in 2021. May 2022 was 1,019 compared with 1,163 in 2021. August was 919 compared with approx 900 in August 2021. With continued effort of the team and target in setting, the rate of improvement experienced to date is expected and planned to continue with the coming months. And that's the end of the statement. Members, I'm perfectly happy just to continue updates on that as it is moving in the right direction, if members are happy with that. Thank you. So I'll move to agenda item 5, public participation. Do we have any questions from the public? Please, Ms Watson.
No questions received on this occasion.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, questions from members. Do we have any questions from members, Ms Watson?
No questions from councillors, Chairman.
Thank you. So if we move to agenda item 7, housing delivery against targets. So this item was flagged up during a review of the performance dashboard by committee. And I would like to remind members to focus on delivery targets for housing and not issues around a new local plan or the delay of that plan. The recommendation, members, is that we consider the report, note its relevance in future discussions about the local plan, and agree whether any further information or action is required at this stage. So if I could please hand over to the portfolio holder for planning, and then I think we'll be hearing from Mr Sneller. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just wanted to say a few words at the beginning of this, because I'm so pleased that you've called this to scrutiny. Because this is hugely important, but what is more important is that people understand the issues and implications surrounding this. We've heard we've read in local newspapers how Dorset Council are not delivering the housing numbers. Now, I don't just want councillors, members to understand, but I want the public to as well. So hopefully the newspaper will pick it up this time. Because the implications, members of the committee had valid reasons to be concerned that the delivery of homes is not meeting the target. Despite the fact that a shortfall in the delivery of homes means that homes are not provided for those in need in Dorset, there are implications for how planning decisions are made. When housing delivery falls to 75% below targets, the presumption in favour of sustainable development in national policy applies. The presumption also applies when the supply of deliverable housing land is less than the equivalent of a 5 years land target. The presumption means that the weight that can be given to the policies in adopted local plans is reduced when making planning decisions. This means that development may take place in locations where if the supply and delivery of homes had been kept up with targets, it would normally have been refused. This is hugely important, and I need people to understand. And please, if you would like to come forward with some ideas that we have not yet come to, be brilliant. That's what scrutiny is about, isn't it, Chairman? You can analyse this, and if we're falling short of something, then please tell us, councillors. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Terry Sneller.
Thank you, David. So this report, as has been said, has been prepared for information in response to a request when the performance dashboard was reviewed back in March. It outlines some of the actual, the housing targets and how they're derived, the delivery of homes against those targets, and then some potential actions that the council is taking or could be taking. I think to start with, it's important to note that the adopted targets which the performance index are measured against are the adopted local plans as of the legacy local authorities. We've mentioned that the local plan being prepared for Dorset Council, that will amend those targets, but currently the adopted targets are what the performance indicator is measured against. And they're listed or set out at para 1.5. Since those plans were adopted and to inform the Dorset Council local plan, the standard method was introduced in national policy and that alters the targets, and that will be what the local plan will be based on, the new local plan will be based on, and they're set out at para 1.6. Every year, council officers monitor through site visits the number of homes which have been completed across the area and the ones that are under construction. And over the past 5 years, the detail of that per former legacy authority area is set out at para 1.8. During an annual period, new homes are granted consent, and as of April 2021, 13,000 homes had either been allocated in local plans, so adopted local plans, or had planning consent across the Dorset Council area, with about 2,000 of those actually being under construction as at April 2021. The report then goes through a number of different reasons as to why housing targets don't keep pace with housing delivery, housing completions don't keep pace with the targets, and then goes on to consider some actions that could be taken. I think it's also important to notice that during the 2020-2021 monitoring year, we went through 2 periods of national lockdown, which effectively reduced the activity on construction sites, which in part is why some of the housing targets for the last 2 years are below what has been achieved historically. Just to give an update, we've just finished processing the housing completions for the current year, so for the 2021-2022 year, and that comes out as 1,946 across the Dorset Council area, so that's an improvement on the previous year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sneller. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you. If I could just add a point to that. I mean, the office has just taken you through these points, but Where in 1.9 it's looking at across Dorset, there are currently 13,007 homes on sites that have either been allocated in local plans or have planning permission, with 2,130 of these being under construction as at April 2021. If I can tell you, Chairman, the most astounding figure isn't there. It's when you do the subtraction. And it's that 10,877 are not under construction. That is a huge, I think that's the most important number we've got here. So, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. So members are open up to questions. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure who this will be relevant for. Just a clarification, because it's quite often asked within my parishes. The current five-year housing land supply target is specific to the existing local plans rather than new one. How often are updates published on that, and where are they? And also a point going a little bit back at West Dorset, we used to have regular meetings with developers which did encourage the development, and these were sort of where developers were required to attend and explain why they weren't. Do we do any of that and have regular sort of prompting and pushing? So I don't know who is best suited to answer those.
Chairman, as to whether we're going to be talking with developers. No, we haven't been. Yes, we are going to be. I'm going to reinstate that point, and we will be going out and talking to developers and seeing why they're not. We've done it in the past, and the funniest thing was you get developers in a room individually and you say to them, what are the problems that you have? Why are you unable to deliver this site? Are there things that we can do to help? And there's never a reason. No one ever gave us a reason. It was never, we can't offer this, the price, or it's the labour force, we haven't got it. There was never a reason. It's fine. So yes, I think we should start those up again and embarrass developers into developing. And Terry and I have been having these conversations, and I'll let him go on to the five-year housing land supplies.
May I come back? There was talk, and I think it would be very helpful to publish a list of how long that the planning permissions have been granted for various developers, and a little bit of name and shame, because I'm sure there will be people who know these developers, or they won't want to be on that list. I don't know if we've considered that.
The five-year housing land supply is produced annually. It's normally published around the end of the year, so the end of the annual year rather than the financial year, so December, January sort of time. We have to wait on information published by the government first before we can publish our five-year supply report. They're all published on the website under the planning page, the planning policy page. I can circulate a link to that if that would be useful. As part of establishing the five-year housing land supply, we do contact developers to ask them when they're going to deliver their sites. We don't do it for all because there are lots. As you say, 13,000 sites have consent. But we do contact the major developers, so the ones on larger sites, to try and understand how their delivery will go over the next 5-10 years or so. As far as publishing details of when consents were granted, it's all published on the planning website, not individually as in which ones will be published where, or would be, but the decision date whether a planning application is published, but we don't put together a list.
The issue, you have to know the planning application number and go and look. What I'm suggesting is we have, certainly for, say, anything over 10 houses, we could just have a list of where they are, when permission was granted, who the developer is, and what's happened. And I think that could be a very useful tool in maybe persuading some developers that they're being a bit tardy.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Roberts. Can I just remind everyone to speak directly into the microphone? I know it's difficult. We're operating in the chamber and we're not in our formal committee room at the moment, but if you could just speak directly into the microphone. Councillor Walsh, I believe you want to come back.
Thank you, Chairman. A very good point, and we could give that information out. But with regards to this paper, how are we going to make housing numbers come forward quicker? What's the stick? What's the carrot? We can give you those numbers and say when they were given permission, they haven't built it out. But then what can we go back? I've tried this with government to give more powers to local authorities, but the power seems to be with the developer. So, I mean, we're here today to see how you've got eyes on scrutiny on how to bring forward those housing numbers. And I'd like to hear how you think, when we give you that information, how we can then force them to build. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Took.
Thank you, Chair. Local authorities, or this local authority, doesn't build houses. So we can't change what's being developed. We're reliant on developers to do that. And there's a bit of a problem there, because it is not always in a developer's interest to build out sites immediately. It may be a cynical view, but long experience has shown it's a repeated situation that developers, if they can not build out, and if we fall below our 75% target, then they get dibs on other sites that they may not otherwise have. And I'm sure they wouldn't do it deliberately. Clearly, they would not be so crass. But there's a suspicion, there's a temptation that developers, it's in their interest sometimes in certain areas not to build. And I think we need someone whose interest it is to build, to be putting forward, or to be building houses. And the authority has an interest in building houses, clearly, because it's what keeps our plans working. And I'd like to see Dorset Council look at ways of building houses, social houses for rent, council houses if you want, in order to start to make sure that we get the sort of houses we want. Now, in amongst those social houses for rent, there's no real reason why the council can't also build some market housing. It might mean that we have to change our approach to risk. And there are awful warnings from BCP about taking that too far. But it's something that as a council I think we could do, and that would affect the delivery numbers. So we could become a house builder. And I'd just like to explore if there are any reasons why we should not do that, because I can't think of too many offhand. At the moment we are, I think, reasonably within the 70, or just within the 75% delivery limit on most of the numbers I've seen there. Possibly in some cases by about 3 houses, but it's close. And if we want to deliver more houses, well, let's build them. Let's have a house building programme from Dorset Council. Councils have historically built lots of houses, and if I remember rightly, the biggest boom in house building was when councils did build houses. So post-war, 40s, 50s, the development of council estates, and I'm not sure 40s and 50s council estates are the model to go for, although some of the houses built in those days were very, very good. The building standards that they had at the time, and I forget the name of the type of houses, but I'm sure somebody here will remind me. But we need to build houses, and I'd just like to know, is there a reason why we can't? I've said quite enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Took. And because there's a political dimension to that, I'm going to go to the portfolio holder to answer it rather than embarrass the officer.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman. When this has been raised in the past with the leader, it's the fact that we do not have the infrastructure within Dorset Council to build our own houses. So we do not build our own houses.
thank you. I understand that, but structures are human inventions, and we are humans, and we can invent new structures. So I think we should probably take a look at doing that. I mean, what you seem to be saying is the reason we don't do it is because we don't do it. And I don't think that works. It doesn't work for me. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, if I could come back. The reason we don't do it is because we haven't got the capability within the council to do it. We haven't got the workforce, we haven't got the people here to do... Well, basically, there's a huge part to building your own houses. I mean, maybe that is the easy way. If it were, would we not be doing it? I can't answer that one. But we don't do it, and it's not because we don't do it because we don't do it, it's we don't do it because we have not got the infrastructure within Dorset Council to do it ourselves. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Thank you for the question, Councillor Took, and I think you raised an extremely important point. Appreciate the fact that this council came into being and it wasn't together for a year before we got hit with a COVID pandemic, and we went through that 2 years, which hampered the council in its transformation, although we still managed to get through it. I'm just going to go to the Director of Place to get a response from him, because I think it's an important point that's raised, and I think possibly it is an aspiration that many councillors across the chamber would like to explore and would like to move in that direction. Mr Selgren.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought it just might be helpful for members in the chamber just to read a very short extract from evidence submitted by the Local Government Association, of which this council, of course, is a member. And I quote, this is exacerbated, this is the housing number situation that you've been discussing this afternoon. Is exacerbated due to councils holding limited tools to incentivise developers to build the homes that local communities need at the scale and speed necessary. And that's in the context of data that's been well publicised by the LGA, that their estimate nationally is something like 1 million homes which have been granted planning permission over the past decade, and those have still not been built out. So I think the point I'm making is that the issue you've raised this afternoon is clearly one which goes beyond Dorset, one that the LGA is mindful of. As a thought, Chairman, and we might pick this up when you come to talk about your future work programme. And of course, one of the things you could do is, as a committee, to perhaps gather some further evidence on that. Certainly, as members in this chamber know, a number of councils have sought to intervene in the market to do some of the things that Councillor Took is suggesting. So again, there might be people that you could invite to give you evidence to find out the options available. I support the point that's made by Councillor Walsh at present, and the Director of Assets and Property sitting to my right. This council doesn't, as it currently stands, have the resources to do that, but clearly that's a situation that members could look at, and this committee might want to make some recommendations.
Thank you, Mr Selgren. And I think as Councillor Took has raised, in part of that in terms of, and he was very deliberate in talking about social housing with proper social rents, as was referred to originally as council tax, that we know, and we've had that discussions many times within this chamber and with various committees within this council, that because of the situation that Dorset's in as being looked upon as being a retirement county, we need to be able to enable those key workers, particularly in social adult care, to be able to stay in the county and to be able to live in the county. And at the moment, with present house prices and the private market value rents, that's becoming an increasing impossibility. So I think it is an important piece of work in a direction possibly this council needs to move, and would, I think, bear out some future scrutiny investigation on that. Thank you. Councillor Canning, did you wish to speak to this point? Was
yes,
it?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Yes, obviously accepting your point that we just don't have the staff at the moment, and that's perfectly understandable. You see why, from a historical perspective, that's the case. But also, I just wonder, do we actually have to build the houses ourselves, or could we provide finance for other people to do it? So if we had a partnership with community land trusts, that sort of body, which also partly gets around the issue of buy-to-lets and things like that in the future, and the council would effectively treat it as an investment. It would put finance forward and expect to get a return on that investment over a period of time. And I know Aidan's back there, I don't know if he's listening to this or not, but are there any sort of legal reasons that stop us from entering into that sort of investment or partnership?
Mr Selgren.
Thank you, Chairman. Indeed, there are a number of vehicles that a council can use to bring forward housing. I mean, probably not for this afternoon, which wise suggesting if you wanted to explore this topic in greater length, we perhaps arrange for some expert witnesses to come and address the committee. But there are a range of tools. Indeed, one of the predecessor councils was exploring one of those, the creation of an arm's length company to do that. and had made some steps towards it. So these are all things that can be looked at. I just, whilst I have your attention, it's just worth saying that our registered providers, of whom we have some extremely good ones in this county, very fortunate in that, are also very ambitious to develop and are doing a lot of good work. And the other policy tool that's available to us, we were able to access funding from Homes England, which of course is the government agency for driving forward house development, particularly more affordable housing and so on. So again, we are in close dialogue with Homes England, but again, I think as members in this chamber are indicating, it's very much about making sure the market conditions are right, because if the market isn't there and can't support it. And again, I'm sounding like the kind of the downer on this one, but I think the other one to be mindful of is the other issue that is having a significant impact at the moment is capacity within the construction sector. I think members will be aware there was the report done by now Lord Farmer, where he looked at the capacity within the construction sector for things like quantity surveyors, engineers and so on, and predicted that there would be a shortfall. Indeed, we've now reached that point where we're seeing just that. The other factor, of course, and I don't need to remind anybody in the meeting this afternoon, that with construction costs rising so fast, it's becoming a very difficult market in which development, just to make sure that developers can see return on investment. But I'd suggest, Chairman, I think what you've done is open a very interesting series of issues that if you did want to explore further, we could bring the necessary experts into the committee to allow you to perhaps do some cross-questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Selkin. Mr. Canning. Sorry, Councillor Canning. Did you come back?
I will. I will do. And in my remarks, I directed at Aidan deliberately because he's aware that on the pension fund side of things, we are being encouraged by government to consider more investment in our local communities, and that is one of the issues that they're pushing as part of infrastructure. And just wondered whether housing would be considered as part of that structure, or whether it's just for more commercial and more other types of investments.
Mr. Dunn.
Thank you. I'll just respond briefly. I'm Aidan Dunn. I'm the Executive Director for Corporate Development. So just follow on with John's comments and sort of a wider comment. In terms of the role of the council and how we can get things done, creating or setting up our own arm's length company is an option, as John's outlined. One of the things that's really, really important, based on experience I've had elsewhere, is working out what it is that the council wants. Is it to develop housing in areas where actually the commercial business case is quite marginal and the market itself wouldn't develop it, and therefore we're prepared to take more of a risk, a market intervention option, as John's described? Or conversely, is it development of a piece of land that actually we own, so it's a commercial activity to try and generate a bigger return for the council to invest in other services subsequently? So there's different options and different reasons. And just to follow on from Councillor Canning's point as well, absolutely there's guidance, or as a pension fund we're being encouraged to invest in our local infrastructure where possible. Once again, it comes back to that commercial return. What commercial, there is that the kind of for the good of the area aspect, but we do have to be clear-sighted on the commercial aspects as well. There's a fine balance. Thank you.
I think, a neighbouring authority bought their housing stock back in, didn't they? So they have got a revenue coming to that council, and the loan that was taken out to buy that housing stock back in is being addressed by the revenue that's coming in from the rents. So I think it's an option that I'm not saying we buy back the housing stock. What I'm saying, I think in terms of a business opportunity, and a revenue input into the council, then I think it's a piece of work that we could look at bringing it back to scrutiny. Thank you. I've got a couple that wish to speak, so I'm going to go to David Shortell first, because I think you said you wanted to speak on this item, on this particular aspect of it. Yeah? Yeah. Councillor Shortell.
Thank you, Chairman. I really wanted to ask the question regarding the delay in development of granted sites. When a particular site is granted permission, there is always a condition which gives them 3 years before they actually need to start the development, because there's usually the delay that's applied. There are situations, I've been told, whereby, in fact, to overcome that, developers quite often quite simply start by putting a spade in the ground and what have you. And that fulfills that condition, which then delays it even further. And I'm just wondering if that happens very often and causing a delay in house building.
Yeah, so it does happen, but it's very rarely that I think I've seen it. I think there are a few sites where there are some exceptional costs associated with the development where they would start and then they would need to address some of the issues on a site. But I've very rarely seen something where someone's actually started a site and then left it for a number of years because it's not in their interest once they've started. They need to keep it going. It's not, you know, they have to move workers onto the site to actually start that development off, and it then doesn't make sense then for them to move them back off site again before start continuing.
But yes, please. There was a mention made that, in fact, quite often it's to the developer's advantage to delay the start of the build in order perhaps the markets might have changed and therefore they could take advantage of that. If that were a general abuse of the condition which applies, is there a system whereby the condition can be reapplied after the 3 years has expired? I'm not sure whether there is, but I just wanted to ask that question.
I don't think unless it's actually within the conditions and the application is approved. I don't think unless something's put in the conditions, then nothing can be done. Mr. Snelling?
Yeah, I don't believe you can do that. I think it's once the condition has been discharged, you can't revisit it unless you're then going back and reapplying for a planning consent again. So.
Councillor Walsh, you wish to come in?
It could be read that the government were looking to change it, that development had to start within 2 years as opposed to 3 years. But we don't know what the changes are going to be coming through the levelling up and regeneration bill until they actually come forward. But that was said, that was muted. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Councillor Took and then Councillor Roberts.
Thanks, Chair. In response to Councillor Shortell, in my own village, there is a site that got planning permission 10 years ago, and I think maybe the officers here might be able to help me with it. It might well be more than 10 years, which is the Alderholt Surplus Stores site. It's not been developed yet. They have made a start. They did a little bit of landscaping and they dug a trench. During the course of which trench digging, they actually breached the archaeological condition that was imposed on them anyway. But that's another story. It does happen. And it's also happened in another site in my village where there's 44 houses that should have been built. Permission was given at appeal, I think 5 years ago now, maybe 4, but certainly more than 3, when the agents for the applicant more or less promised that development would be done very quickly. And it wasn't. So it does happen. It's not uncommon. I'm not saying it's par for the course, but it does happen and it happens quite regularly. So it's something we need to be aware of. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if you can say you've got to complete the development, otherwise you lose your planning application, because when it's 15 houses out of 40 are built and you say, no, you've lost it now, I don't know what you do. But there's got to be something that can be done to encourage developers, maybe fines. That might be a way around it. But there's certainly something that can be explored to make developers meet their obligations and build in good time, rather than simply land bank, which is what a lot of them seem to do. They've got land, they've got permission, that's fine, we'll sort it later. And that's something that needs changing, I think. in terms of the council having an arm's length company to build houses, I think that would be well worth exploring, and I'd like to see if we can get some reports from other authorities where they have done this sort of thing, so where they've set up a company, and what the results have been, how they did it, why they did it, and what the results have been. So we get a broad approach as to what works and maybe somewhat of what doesn't work. So we can then have a sensible discussion about what we need to do. Bearing in mind, Dorset has a need for retirement homes. It has a need for homes for key workers who are sadly not the best paid, as well as executive homes, free market homes. So there's a mixed need, and we need to explore what we can do to build what we need. And if the local authority has the ability to build houses, then I think it helps us meet our targets, and it helps us build Dorset the way that the people of Dorset want it to be built, rather than the way that investors might want it to be developed, because the two agendas are not quite the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Took. And just to build on something Councillor Took said, is it really a fact that we need to be very careful about how we word the conditions when we have a plan application in front of us and we approve a plan application, and it's all about how we actually word those conditions in order to bring pressure to bear on developers to build out in a sufficiently reasonable time? Is that possible?
I don't think it is, Chairman. I think basically with that, the conditions are as the conditions are. I think personally, and I've tried talking about this at government when I'm up in Parliament, the developer seems to have more of the power than we do. We need some of that power moved onto our side. Now, that's not saying things aren't fair or whatever. It's just we would like to bring forward housing quicker, but there just seem to be many constraints. I think the best thing that we've come out of this meeting with is that we should be talking more with developers. I mean, officers and myself, we should be talking with developers. It's quite a shame when developers, they're away working on a plan for 3, 4, 5 years, lots of money involved in it, then they turn up with us, show us, and we say, well, that's not what we had in mind at all. We don't want that. Now, if we can talk with developers at an earlier stage and even show them through plans what we actually want for Dorset, and that is what we know we want for Dorset because that's what the people in the consultation told us they want for Dorset, then that's got to be the easier way around. We need to let them, if they don't know what we need, then they can't deliver it. But I think it's very important that we do go out there and we talk more with developers and the people to see what is needed. I mean, key worker housing, yes, it's a great asset, a great thing that we need. But also when you're looking at affordable housing, and I don't just mean affordable housing to rent, because that seems the easy solution for developers to do, and they've got templates for that easy, we can just do that. Now we want different templates, and we want affordable housing to buy, many different things. So it's not a simple solution, and we need to be talking. It's only through talking with developers we're going to get that resolution that we both agree with. And I mean, there was talk about looking at solar panels and that on roofs and those sort of things. Now, one developer recently, at a meeting I was at, said to the committee, it was a parish council meeting, not a full one, it was a parish council meeting, and they said, well, condition us to do it. Now, that's fine if the developer actually wants to follow those conditions. You can't enforce those conditions. But that's through negotiation. And that's what we have to do. We've got to negotiate with developers, with landowners, with all these things to deliver what Dorset wants. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, it doesn't appear as a statutory planning authority we're always playing in a level playing field. And government, as we've said many times, needs to move much quicker in terms of planning. And move with the times, which it doesn't appear to be doing, unfortunately. And communication is everything. So yeah, I think we'd all be very supportive of that engagement with developers, so that we're all on the same page and we're going to get the proper outcomes that we need. We've got Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a slight caution for local authorities that do get involved in. If we think of Bristol and its energy scheme, which cost 43 million loss, the Scottish Government and the Calmac ferries. Local authorities are not developers. They're not builders. The developers, look at Mighty going bust, one of the biggest companies in the southwest. It's a wishful dream that we as a local authority have more knowledge and more skill than developers who do. We need to actually ensure that the houses are built rather than us try to pretend that we can be better at it than companies that have been doing it for decades. Just a word of caution.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. So can I just take back your original comments that you made, Councillor Walsh? So on page 13, 1.7 within the report, we talk about the numbers that have been delivered. And I understand within the local plan, it sets the numbers that are going to be delivered, and then you have windfall developments that don't actually make up those numbers. But and what we've got in the report is the total numbers, isn't it, of both what's been delivered in the local plan and what windfall developments we've had come forward. So you alluded to concerns that you had earlier, and I would share those as well, that within the report it says that only 2 areas of the 4 areas actually achieve their numbers on their annual development completions to bring forward. So East Dorset in 2019-20 with 499, and it was tasked with delivering 458. And in West Dorset, Weymouth and Portland in 2018-19, 925, and that was tasked with delivering 811 dwellings. And from 2016 to 2021, that's the only 2 years that we've actually met with the demand and delivered what we were supposed to. So that's quite a concern, isn't it? And we're not in a position where we could actually be challenged by government and we could receive not only penalties, financial penalties, but also an increase, I think it was a 20% increase on housing that would need to be added. So just wondering, where are we with our discussions with government? How much risk are we at the moment?
Thank you, Chairman. I can point you towards my report that I gave to Cabinet a few weeks ago on where we stand. Yes, there are issues, and no, we're not in the strongest position we could possibly be in. And the things that you point out, looking at East Dorset, they only once met those figures, and that was 2019-20, as you said. North Dorset, never has it made those figures. Purbeck, never has it made those figures. And West Dorset, only once in the whole period. So yes, there are issues between what we're doing, what we're delivering, and what government say the standard methodology should be. But we are waiting, and hopefully through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, there's going to be a different standard methodology put forward. But I am speaking in government on the 1st of November, and I will be raising these points for Dorset, because I've been invited to speak there for Dorset, and I think it's very important that people see we're a very special place, Dorset, a very rural place with even some urban bits of urban parts out there. But these figures don't work for us. And I've said it before, when I'm speaking for the Town and Country Planning Associations, New Communities Groups, I've said before, we're not arguing the numbers, we're very much pro-development in Dorset, but let us deliver what we know we need in Dorset, because they don't know in government what we need, and we do. As we've mentioned, the key worker dwellings, we know what we need in Dorset, let us deliver it, please.
Thank you. And just off the top of my head, and Mr. Snelling might be able to correct me on this, but are we not in somewhere in the region of about 83 to 87% of land in Dorset we can't develop because it's AONB or it's a special scientific interest or it's floodplain or it's lowland, Dorset heathland? I just wondered whether the government actually take into consideration, which it appears not, and whether or not how we compare with other authorities with similar constraints in terms of the amount of land they've got within their county area that they can actually develop.
I can't answer exactly how much land we have which is covered by a designation, but yes, there are quite a lot of designations in Dorset. Not all of them restrict development, so you can develop in the AONB, but it's generally minor development rather than major development. How we then compare with others and delivery of housing, again, I can't answer that because I don't have the figures to do a direct comparison. Currently, the government's approach requires us to meet the emerging standard methodology figure would be what we would have to try and meet, and that doesn't take into account the constraints in an area at the moment. But as Councillor Walsh indicated, there is suggested change coming through with the amendments to national policy, which may change that approach, but at the moment that isn't there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Snow. I've got Councillor Brown next, then Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. To me, a big part of this is going to be the economic side from a developer's perspective, because they have a limited capacity in terms of where they can build, and therefore, on a macro level, we are competing against other planning authorities in terms of where they prioritise their resources to build out. And therefore, and this is a very simplistic analogy of the house building market, but David, you've known me long enough to know that I am rather simplistic, so hear me out. A lot of their costs are fixed. The price of building a house is reasonably fixed in terms of how much it costs. The costs of obtaining planning are reasonably fixed within reason. The price in which they can sell a property is set by the market, so the sale price is reasonably fixed. There isn't much room for negotiation there. The only significant variable cost for a developer is how much they pay for the land. And therefore, by the time we are engaging with developers, i.e. they put in a outline planning application, the dies are cast. They've secured an option, they've set a price, the landowner will accept more than likely the highest bid, and we can't blame them for that. We'd probably all do exactly the same if we were in that situation, because they're taking their multi-million pounds and buying the new villa in the south of Spain, and good luck to them. And then we're left with developers that then use all the tricks in the book to reduce what I would call the social good around development, affordable properties in whatever guise that comes in, community infrastructure, building roads outside people's properties, treating their customers with respect. You can see where I'm going here. And therefore that causes animosity as well, which causes a big issue for us. So development has a particularly negative connotation with our residents, and developers are restricted in the position that they've set themselves into by making that agreement with the landowner. So what mechanisms do we realistically have to make Dorset a more attractive place to build? And then part of my second question is, do we want to? Because, as you know, David, I've grown up in Shaftesbury, and Shaftesbury has had a lot of development from persimmon. Properties that are less than 10 years old that are falling down. Is that what we want for the people of Dorset? I would argue that we want better quality development. We want better built development. We want better looking development. So how do we use the economic structure in which our developers operate to generate the response which we want, which is, as you keep pointing out, David, good quality homes for local needs where local people want it with good infrastructure around it? I don't know the answer, and I hate being a person that just points out the obvious and two, the problem without coming up with a solution. But I guess the question I'm getting at is, how do we get in when those land deals are being made? Because to me, that's when sort of, if you like, history is, the options are set before we're involved to start with. So Councillor Took mentioned the idea of a house building company. That could be an option to look to deliver it. My gut feeling is that would require hundreds of millions plus of capital to get us going, coupled with we would need to compete for the talent, which Mark was pointing out, and that comes with a lot of pitfalls in its own, because we would still be competing with the private sector developers who will base their financial model on building developments that will not meet the expectations that a Dorset council-backed development will want, because I hope we will aspire to be better than Persimmon. We better if we go down that route. So that to me seems to be one of the real big problems. So how do we get in before those deals are done and the dies are cast?
Councillor Walsh, I'll come to you and then I'll ask Mr Sneller to tidy it up. I don't mean that the same the way it come out.
God, Councillor Brown, you speak as much as I do. Right, some very important points that you made there. Now, some of these things are being addressed through government. I mean, land value is a very important point. That's the starting point. And government did say a couple of years ago that agricultural land, which is what we have, should be going for no more than 10,000 an acre. Now, that's ridiculous saying that, because looking in Gillingham, when farmers have sold it for a fortune for the southern extension, you're not going to get their neighbour saying, oh, I'll just take 10,000 for this. What was being said was that the land value would be taken out of the viability equation. So when a developer's saying, this isn't viable anymore, can't afford this, the calculations before used to include the viability, the land value. They're saying that won't be counted in it. If these things are brought in, then they will be. To go back to what Councillor Roberts said, that was reinforcing what I had said, that the reason we're not developers is because we don't have the knowledge or experience. Also, what Councillor Brown has said with our residents is very, very important, because as I say to people, residents remember the last worst development, and sadly in Dorset we've got some of those. Now, when I took over this portfolio and I met with planning officers, the first thing I said was I wanted Dorset to be known for good development. If it was good development, build it. If it was bad development, don't even look at it. And that's where we should be working, because it is the reputation. And you said a lot more than that, and I'm sure we'll continue this conversation outside of this, Councillor Brown. But as to where we go with how we can make people deliver more, then we've got what Mr Sneller has put in the what we already do and the possibilities that we could do, and the actions that we do and what we could consider. So if members think we should be considering different ways of developing or working with developers, I'm very pleased you said we should be talking to them more, because that is a way to go forward. But you were going to invite Mr Sneller to speak afterwards. Sorry, I demoted him to a councillor. Sorry, if you'd like to speak, councillor.
Yeah, I think it's important to think about the other factors that do influence the cost to a developer. So land cost is one is development cost, and the other one, the build costs themselves, but the other one is the policy costs that we put on through the local plan. So if we require a certain amount of affordable housing and we require high quality development through a policy in the local plan, the developers who are then bringing forward their sites should be thinking about that when they are looking at land, the value that they have in the land and the receipt they would get from selling the properties. So by having that clarity through a local plan, that's one way of hopefully influencing the value that's actually paid for land at the beginning of the process. Now, a lot of the deals, unfortunately, are done during the local plan production before it's adopted, or before the local plan. It's historic deals that are done, which means the ship's almost sailed on those. But I think putting our policy position and the clarity forward so that developers and landowners know what our expectations of them are is one way of helping to deliver the better quality and to influence the value of the scheme, as it were.
Thank you, Mr Seller. We'll come to you in a minute. Viability is, Councillor Walsh, is something that I've been extremely critical of in the past, and my predecessor council, East Dorset District Council, which was the statutory planning authority then, I was critical of it then in that chamber as well. We're sat here today trying to work out why we're not delivering the housing numbers that we need to be delivering, and part of the problem that we've got is when the viability issues crop up, the first thing that gets cut is the social and affordable housing. So the minute that gets cut, that reduces our housing numbers as well. It's not be perceived to be not profitable for developers to be building social affordable housing if they can be building more executive type housing. And we've already said in the past that with a local plan, we need to be delivering the type of housing that the area needs, which is something it could be argued that we haven't been doing. So I think that is probably a piece of work that we need to be looking at in the future as to why we're not delivering that social and affordable housing, how that is impacting on numbers, because what's not in the report's good, but what is not showing us is just how much of that affordable and social housing we've been missing out over those years from 2016 through those viability studies where that social affordable housing has been cut and cut and cut year on year on year, which has obviously reduced our housing numbers as well. I mean, I know that in my area that those sites were supposed to deliver 50% up to 50% social and affordable. They were barely delivering 36%. So that is seriously impacting on the housing numbers that we've been able to deliver. So I think if members are in agreement, that's a piece of work I think we need to look at in the future. Councillor Walsh, I get an itching feeling you need to come back on that.
So I hold you in very high regard, Chairman. I've known you for many years. But will you please stop using the phrase that we deliver? We don't deliver housing. And every phrase you said there said we deliver, and that's the confusion out there. One of the points that Councillor Brown also said about the viability issue was no developer in the area. Now, as you know, the Southern Extension, which I've been working on for the last 10 years in Gillingham, has got 2 areas in Loddon Lakes, and they're being done by Taylor Wimpey. Now, they were going to start the first one because that was fine, but they said they couldn't do the second phase because that wouldn't be viable. And I said, what do you mean? If the first phase is viable, why not the second? And they were saying because the manager of the site was going to retire at the end of the first phase. And because they don't have a yard or whatever, they're not based in North Dorset. It wasn't viable for them to set up there. Thankfully, they found another manager for the next phase 2, so that's going to happen. But if you haven't got a developer within your area, and North Dorset have no developer there, it adds a huge cost to them because they've got to move their workforce or they've got to house their workforce. There's many, many different things that add costs to all of these different things. And they're not excuses, they are costs, but it doesn't make it attractive to develop in North Dorset. So they're things we come against. Thank you.
But Councillor Walsh, we do have developers that are national.
Yes, I know. And if you can get them to come and build in North Dorset, then well done, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I will go to Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure most of you attended the session on nutrient mitigation today. I think there is a very good case for you, David, and our MPs to ask the government to re-examine the standard methodology, as Dorset has one of the highest areas of nutrient mitigation in the country. That with the AONB really is restricting our ability to build houses. So I think perhaps the standard methodology ought to be much less so that we can more easily achieve our numbers because of those additional barriers. And the other plea, and I know you've made this, Councillor Walsh, every parish council I go to spends hours about the need for affordable housing somewhere else. And until we can really get through to our parishes that 1 or 2 in each village really wouldn't make any difference to the value of their houses, then perhaps we could start getting a little more building going on where it could be sustained and justified. Most villages have got a gap between houses that could easily take 1 more.
I agree, Councillor Roberts. There needs to be a change in the mindset, I think. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I feel empowered. I mean, I'm fighting the urge to go to the changing rooms and put my underpants on outside my trousers. Because the amazing thing here this afternoon is that everyone is speaking to deliver housing numbers. And as Councillor Roberts says, wherever I go, I've got people objecting to any housing being built. So that also, from your scrutiny today, has got to be, as Councillor Roberts says, one of the biggest constraints is that, yes, we can deliver housing, we can bring developers in, but the people don't want it. And that is the main thing I fight. In most places, I mean, as I cover the whole of Dorset, I'm hated more than COVID because I'm going there promoting development. But people don't want development. So if your scrutiny can help me get through that one, then I'll be very, very grateful. And I promise not to leave the changing rooms till the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Did you wish to come back, Councillor Roberts? No. And we're going to move to Councillor Canning. Okay, so I'll go to Councillor Shortell.
We've mentioned earlier, of course, in order for a developer to conform to what the council is looking for, right, they have to consider the viability of the development based on the land charges which they paid against what the overall cost of the build is. Being very cynical, there might be a position whereby we haven't got the real figures, and therefore there might be some duplicity between the developer and the landowner to actually show us different figures than what actually exists in order to help their viability in doing the development. Or have I gone too far?
Councillor Shortell. Yeah, the viability issues with the statutory planning authority not having officers in the room when the developer and the landowner agree their price, and then the statutory planning authority having to bring in an independent land valuer to assess it. We've gone over this over and over again. I know government have moved slightly on it, but do you have anything further to add? No. Councillor, Mr. Stanning, sorry.
I think it's important to think about how local policies are now put together. So at the in the past, the onus on viability assessments up front as a part of the plan process was less than it is now. At the moment, we have to consider, so when we're producing the new Dorset Council plan, we would have to consider the viability of development and whether the policies that we're putting in place would make development viable or not, and therefore making sure that they are actually achievable and deliverable. If a developer then comes in and doesn't meet the affordable housing requirement, for example, that's when we would have that open book discussion with an external viability assessor, and it would be an open book discussion looking at all of the facts about the case, and that's when that independent assessment is done. So with the new policies, if the developer, or if the policies are achievable in viability terms, then they should be met unless there are exceptional circumstances associated with a particular site. And that's when the independent assessor comes in and helps with the decision.
Councillor Shortell, did you wish to come back? Are you happy?
Chairman, I think I've said enough.
Councillor Shortell, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Alford. My apologies, Councillor Alford. I didn't realise you wanted to speak on this item, but I think you wish to ask something.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Tony Alford, Egerton Ward. I'm a guest at this meeting. But seeing the paper and listening to the debate reminded me that a few years ago, the former MP for West Dorset, namely Oliver Letwin, did some work by going round and visiting all the major house builders to learn how they do their business. And he produced a report. And there was a lot of insight in that report. And I would recommend finding it and circulating it amongst this group because it could be useful as a good read. I think one of the things that I remember from it is that a national house builder would build out in very small batches. And this is all about maintaining the retail value of the house. It's all about retaining the value of the land bank. And I suggest it's important to understand how these house builders, undertake their business, because that is the only way you can have a useful conversation with them, understanding where they come from and what their economic motivation is. So, I think I'm not going to say this is an easy task to crack, but I think being well prepared is going to be useful.
Thank you, Councillor Alford. Can I just move people to, it was at 1.14, para 6, and it says, ensuring that policy requirements are not making development unviable, range of policies which can dissuade developers from developing, which I think touches on something Councillor Brown was saying earlier, and also your mantra, Councillor Walsh, about good development and sustainable development, that planning can be good and it can be good for the community and for the locality. But I think it's a balance, isn't it, about striking the policies and getting that right so that developers can develop, rather than pandering to developers, where we get, as we said earlier, about poor development coming in and bad housing coming in and not really well thought out. So what I'm basically saying, I think, is that the direction of travel, I would assume, now needs to be to get into the room on a far more often basis, to have those discussions with those developers in order to bring about the development that we need. I just wondered how officers feel they're going to explore that and bring that forward. Councillor Walsh, I'll let you go first.
Thank you. It's one of the things I've also asked for up in Parliament, because it would be a lot easier. We have good developers and we have some not good developers, and I won't name any. But I think we should be able to use a developer's history as a material planning consideration. And also, if someone comes up and says, we want to build 500 houses there, and you can say, but you haven't started the 300 you got permission for over there. These things we should be able to use, not against people, but working with people. All this should be done by negotiation and working with developers rather. But if there are reasons why you don't prefer a developer, you should be able to use that against them as a material planning consideration when looking at an application. And I'll continue to push that one as well. Thank you.
There's not a lot really to add to what it says there, to be honest. We work with developers, we work with the other statutory consultees to try and establish what policies we do need, and then with councillors as well about what policies and what aspirations they have for development. All of this is then tested for the policy impact upon viability. So in theory, and I think national policy sort of states that we should have a period when all the policies in the plan, when considered together, should be considered viable once the plan's been adopted. So we do work with developers and others to make sure that those policies will be viable to deliver development.
Okay. Councillor Took.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to support what Councillor Walsh has just said, because I think that's actually quite a reasonable thing for us to do. If we're looking at cases where a developer is putting forward something that might be a little bit larger than they're normally able to bite off, we should be able to investigate and say, okay, you're saying that this is the development you want. A, are you able to deliver that? And how can you convince us that you're going to deliver that? Because unless you can deliver it, there's no point giving you planning permission. We've had, again, I go back to my own patch, my own village. We've had houses where approval was granted at appeal, having been refused by EDDC. And the agents in that case made a big thing of how quickly they were going to be able to develop this site. That was 4 or 5 years ago, and they haven't done anything yet. Now, the people at appeal who were making these promises were not the developers. They were a company who specialised in taking sites to appeal and getting planning permission. Once they've got planning permission, they can then sell all. They don't sell it because they never owned it. The landowner can then sell to a developer with planning permission. So the people making the promises at appeal were not the people who were going to develop it, and to my mind, would have had no right to make any promises because they weren't going to do it. So if we can look at applications and say, who's going to develop this? What's their track record? Do we believe it's viable? If that can be a material planning consideration, I think that would be a very valuable tool for us. So I would agree with that. Thank you.
Does anybody want to respond to that? No?
Madam Chairman, I'm pleased for the support, and I will continue pushing that, because I think it should be a justifiable material consideration.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to go to, there's at 1.17 on page 18, where we talk about when the housing delivery falls below the 75% targets, and then we're left in a position where we have a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and we've sat on planning committees where this has come before us before, and there's at least one area within Dorset that has been precariously close to that, and actually has crossed that threshold and has been in that position. And it comes back to comments that have been made by members concerning town and parish councils and infilling and building within villages and some smaller towns, and which can often meet with some resistance. And I think as a planning authority, we don't necessarily get the message across to the public. The risks that are involved, that if we don't deliver the housing, then that we fall below that 75% threshold, what they could end up having being delivered on their doorstep, which they wouldn't like. But if they actually are more engaging and are more accepting that house building needs to happen, it's going to happen somewhere, because the government are telling us we've got to build it, and we need to be in the driving seat ourselves and ensuring that we know where it's going and what we're going to build. So I just wondered, are the officers satisfied with the policies and protocols that we've got in place to enable engagement with parish councils and town councils to bring forward housing development with such things as shared options and delivery and community land trusts? Have we got that nailed down? Have we got that right, or is there a lot more work that needs to be done around that? Thank you.
We do engage with parish councils. There are a couple of different approaches that we have. So we can bring forward development through the local plan and the engagement that we do through that. But that's more long term. Our housing team engage with parishes around community land trusts, but they're generally smaller scale developments and rural exception sites as well. Exception sites, which again are smaller scale developments. There's also the approach where parishes can bring forward their own development through a neighbourhood plan, which again, we have a team within the council who work alongside parish councils to help them to deliver housing that they need. Community land trusts, neighbourhood plans are generally coming from the bottom up, and we work with local communities to deliver them. So if there is no initial aspiration to do that, then the only other option is through the local plan route.
Now, because I still feel we meet a lot of resistance as a statutory planning authority from towns, parish councils, from delivering those small developments within their communities. I think there's a lack of understanding, as I've said, about, from the general public, the intrinsic risk they're at of what could be delivered within their communities if we're not meeting our housing quotas. Do members and officers think that possibly we need to actually up our level of engagement, that communication, doing road shows with town and parish councils to get those messages across? Because it doesn't feel to me like we're quite managing it at the moment. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. Due to COVID, so much was being done over the phone or over the internet. And a member from Dorchester actually said I looked very stern when I was talking over Teams, which I don't mean to be, because I'm quite a nice chap. But one of the things is now it's face-to-face. I'm out there talking. And we've got 160 town and parish councils registered under the DAPTC. And I will get round them all. And I'm going to them. I've started to, because it's very important that we talk to them. Not only me, but me with their member, actually working with their parish and town councils. It's a huge thing to do. And where Laura Miller, and I can't think for the life of me, Laura Beddoes, taking her sofa round, I think it's a brilliant idea. where we go and sit on the sofa in someone's town centre and they come and talk to us, as opposed to us going and asking them questions. Because of course they've got issues, and we need to be talking to these things. And yes, most of the, objection is coming from the town and parish councils representing their residents, who, it's sad to say, do not always understand the situation. And it needs us to be out there explaining the situation. And I mean, in Gillingham, I was so proud, Chairman, some years ago, when I went to them and said, right, we're getting this extra development. You can spend 5 years objecting to it and get it anyway, or you can spend the next 5 years working on a master plan. And they master planned the southern extension to Gillingham. This was designed by the people of Gillingham. And we had Sajid Javid came down, he was the then Secretary of State, saying this is what he wanted the whole country to do, was communities to design their own developments. It can work, but you have to start that off with talking. In some areas, I just meet with objection. You have to get people talking and working together. So yes, I totally agree with what you're saying, Chairman. Not enough is being done, but we're trying to do more and we will do more. So thank you.
Thank you. Before I bring Mr. Sneller in, and I appreciate you want to speak in a minute as well, Councillor Roberts. Just to be parochial at the moment, as you know, Mr. Walsh is portfolio holder of planning. My own town, Wimborne Minster, took on 50% of the new build in the East Dorset District Council local plan, Christchurch and Coal Hill, and its tax base will have increased, well, the town will have increased by half as much again. There were several factors to that. One, it made the town more viable because it gave it a bigger tax base. And also, as a town council, the encouragement was to work with the then local planning authority, statutory planning authority, which was East Dorset District Council, in order to, as you say, mould and create and model that development that would actually give the residents what they needed within their area. Now, the trouble with bolting on these developments onto towns, as we all know, it doesn't actually provide the necessary all of the infrastructure you need, certainly when it comes down to transport and road links. And it does meet opposition from the members of the public, but nevertheless, it still can deliver huge benefits to the local community. So I'm pleased to hear that you're moving in that direction. I would like to see more done in that direction in terms of engagement with town and parish councils and local populace, because it does bring huge benefits. I've said to you before that Wimborne is a classic model actually to go and look at to see what it is bringing forward to the local communities. Sorry to be parochial at the moment, but I think it's worth mentioning. I'll let you come back briefly, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Sneller.
I will be very brief. One of the things I've learned in the last year was if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And I think that's very, very relevant. Now, I went to government last time I was speaking up in government, and I got 7.3 million from the Housing Infrastructure Fund for the access road to the southern extension of Gillingham. Otherwise, it would have gone past primary school without any road markings outside because it's never been adopted. And I'm trying to prove to people that things can be done differently. We don't have to do things how they were done before. When I got that money, I went to Highways and I said, I want you to build this road. We've got the money. We don't do that. And I want you to build the road. We don't do that. I said, well, we do now. It's a different way of doing it. I said, and if you build the road, we haven't then got to adopt it afterwards, because hopefully they'll build it to the right standards. But the thing is, we don't have to do things as they've always been done. We can change the way things are being done. And while government are listening to us, and Dorset is being a major player now, they are listening to us. I mean, when you get invited to speak up there, they're going to listen. And that's what's important, because we need them to see we can do things differently, because we are pro-development, the right development in the right place. And now I'll stop, Chairman.
Mr. Sneller, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Roberts.
I think I would agree that early engagement in the planning process is very important. Quite often people don't, or local people don't necessarily engage fully within the planning process until too late in the process, I think. And I think getting in that early engagement is something that is always a trick, or always a difficult thing to do with the planning process. Yeah, that's about what I was going to say.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman. It was really a fairly specific point. There's been quite a lot in the national press about the how neighbourhood plans are ceasing to have material planning thing, and the parishes are picking up on this. I've had a couple who are thinking of abandoning it because they say after 4 or 5 years it doesn't mean anything. And I think we could do with a briefing note about how to refresh and how they remain a material planning consideration, because the parishes are getting the wrong end of the stick. They read from someone in Surrey who says it was pointless having them, and they're almost looking as an excuse because there's a lot of work involved. But I really think we need to sort of up our game in telling people, yes, they're incredibly valuable. It allows you to decide the future of your village, and they will remain a material planning consideration as long as you refresh regularly. Because that point seems to have been lost.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Okay, so I've got nobody else wishing to speak. Councillor Walsh.
Sorry, Chairman, if I can just refresh that. That's one of the reasons I'm going round to the town and parish councils, is to ensure that they do continue with the neighbourhood plans because they are so important. What was annoying was when the National Planning Policy Framework changed last time. It said that after 2 years, a neighbourhood plan was worthless. Not worthless, but worth less. And I tried to say to people, the car you bought 2 years later, it's worth less than it was then. It's not worthless, it's just worth less, which is why people renew it after 5 years, you can do. And I'm encouraging people, you would never stop your neighbourhood plan. In Gillingham, it took 6 years to do it. And I worked on it for the first 2, but I couldn't continue anymore. Now, they are so vital. And people are saying you ignore the things in our neighbourhood plan. We never do. It is part of the supplementary planning documents. It's very, very important. So please advise anyone that thinks differently to continue with the neighbourhood plan. And that's the message I should be giving when I go out to the town and parish councils. So thank you for bringing that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Took.
Thank you for that, Councillor Walsh. And I agree, it's always a case that you've got to move a neighbourhood plan forward. It's got to move with the times. What might concern parish councils, for example, is how do you go about updating your neighbourhood plan? And I think that was the nub of Councillor Roberts' question as well, which is how do you do it? Do you have to have another referendum every 2 years? What's the actual process? Because I'm not clear on that, and I don't think my local neighbourhood plan committee is clear on that. We're sort of aware that it's an ongoing process, but some of the details are missing. I'd be very grateful to learn a bit more about that.
I feel that I'm talking more than Mr. Snellis.
There is a process, and the need for a referendum depends on the amount of change that's going on with the plan. So if it was a light touch amendment to the plan, and the examiner of the plan may decide that a referendum isn't needed. If there is more substantial change to the plan, then yes, a referendum may well be needed. We have been having some engagement meetings with parish and town councils, and the last one is tomorrow, engagement workshops where neighbourhood planning was something that was raised in all of those workshops. And I think you're right, further clarity is actually, or making it clear to neighbourhood plan groups exactly what's involved in an update may be helpful, and I'll pass that back to a colleague.
Thank you. I'm going to start bringing this to a close now. So there's been quite a lot of points have been raised, and Ms Watson's taken a lot of them down. So just going to run through a couple that I've got here. And that was to explore a future piece of work surrounding the authority delivering a housing programme, social rent due to cost of living, key workers retention, etc. And that may be using our own land supply and a developer developing on that, or whether it's going to be an arm's length build company that we actually develop ourselves. Again, to impress on the portfolio holder, the dialogue with government, which I know he's already undertaken and is doing, and that obviously needs to continue. Engagement with town and parish councils to bring forward local development to enable housing delivery, communication and roadshows, which I think has come out, and also to get an understanding of social and affordable numbers, housing numbers that have not been delivered since 2016, which has impacted quite heavily on our housing delivery numbers that we don't deliver, as was pointed out by the portfolio holder to me. Remiss of me. Does any other member have anything just wish to add to that? So Miss Watson's taken a lot of notes, and there's been a lot more to add to that. Is there any burning issue that any member has? No? If I go back to our recommendation, members consider the report, note its relevance in future decisions about local plan, agree with any further information or actions required at this stage. So if members are happy with what we've discussed, I think we've given that a good airing. You happy? Ms Watson.
I just want to be clear where we're kind of ending this discussion. Was there another piece of work you want to pick up? Do we want to do some scoping? I'm just wondering whether or not you want a few members to volunteer to maybe get together with myself and maybe pull together a scope for a piece of work that might cover some of these things. Some of these things might be just, I don't know, something for the portfolio holder to take away, but maybe if we got together and looked at a scope, we could decide what may be needed doing different ways and where's the best place for it to be done, just thinking in terms of the overview looking forward, the scrutiny looking back. But I just think to start with, whether or not we could just get a few members who'd be interested to sit down and maybe put a scope together based on this discussion today, and then we could see where we were with it and how we might want to move some of it forward.
Okay. We can take up this meeting. I'll take volunteers now, but I think we also look across the chamber from any experience we've got within the chamber as well. Councillor Shortell? Yeah, okay, thank you. And Councillor Took, was there anybody else? Okay, put me down for it as well, yeah, okay. And we'll have a discussion outside this meeting and see whether we can reach out across the chamber as well. And obviously for some of the committee members that aren't here, to see where we can get the experience from. Yeah, thank you.
John, I'd just comment, there's been reference to a number of national reports in the course of this debate, and it might be helpful if the officer just make sure perhaps you've got those available to you when you have that scoping meeting, because there's quite a lot of good work being done which you could build. And I think, again, as part of the debate, you were suggesting thoughts of perhaps talking to other councils. So, again, we can perhaps bring that together as part of the scoping piece of work.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr Sneller, for your report and for all the questions you've answered. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Walsh, as usual. Very enlightening. Thank you. I'm going to move to agenda item 8, risk management, place and resources. My apologies, Mr Eyre, for the length of time you've had to wait, and for your colleague, Mr Trotter. The recommendation is that the committee notes and reviews the key risks identified in the risk registers. Okay, I'll have something to say after the report. So over to you, Mr Eyre. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. I'm Mark Eyre, I'm the Service Manager for Assurance, and I'm accompanied virtually today by David Trotter, who's the Council's Risk and Resilience Officer, and he compiled the paper for you today. So this is the first time that we've actually submitted a risk management report to this committee. Previously, the risk papers have been considered by Audit and Governance Committee. However, really the focus there at Audit and Governance needs to be more so around the assurance that the risk management framework is effective, rather than any scrutiny of the risks themselves. So that's really the reason for taking this paper to yourselves today. It provides you with a snapshot of what are deemed to be the most significant risks, and will help to hopefully provide some assurance to you that those risks are being managed appropriately. Similarly, in the same way that you consider the performance framework, the risk register may also be a really good evidence base for you when determining future areas of focus and scrutiny for the committee. So just to set a little bit of a scene, each of the council services maintain their own element of the risk register, and they will identify the risks impacting on their area of service. They're generally owned at a service manager, head of service or director level, and the appendix to this report contains all the risks from place and corporate services that have currently been identified by those risk owners as high or extreme. And a similar paper was considered by People and House Scrutiny Committee this time last week, picking up these areas of service within that remit. So the risk register is updated by the service itself, and you'll see that with each risk that's identified in that report, it contains a management update completed by the risk owner to identify the current status, any actions that have been taken to try and reduce the risk down to an acceptable level, and a sort of anticipated target risk level where they want to get to. So the register itself also contains medium and low-level risks, but those have been excluded from this particular report. So you're only looking at high and extreme. There is more detail in the background. Councillors can access both the risk dashboard that's recently been developed by the Council's Business Intelligence team, and that helps to delve into the detail of those risks. You can also access the actual full risk register itself. In a moment, David's going to provide a brief demonstration of this to show you this tool that is at your disposal. The detail in the dashboard itself is live information. I'm really conscious that the paper that you've got presented here today, whilst it was accurate at the end of August, due to the postponement of the last meeting, there may be a number of risks that have moved on since that time. So, Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present the paper. If you're happy, I'll pass over to David for that brief demo of the risk dashboard. And I think, if so, he's going to use my assurance service as an example of the process. Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon, members. Can you hear me? Take that's a yes. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see the dashboard in front of you now?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. This has really helped me when I'm sort of providing the report to members. All of our risks are currently held within SharePoint, and the Power BI in front of you integrates seamlessly into SharePoint. Hence, it's pulling all the information from SharePoint to provide this data here. As you can see, it really does provide data in a really nice, clear way, and it's fast and easy to see the relevant trends and information at a glance. We can also filter down from a directorate level to teams, and the view you've got in front of you now shows you that in total we've got 310 open risks, 7 of which are extreme, 58 are high, 187 are medium, and 58 are low. Elements of this dashboard I've incorporated into the report in front of you today. So I just want to sort of quickly go through a few little things. So if I look at, for example, corporate development, if I click on here, you can see it show instantly that within corporate development there's 2 extreme risks, 81 open, 19 high, 49 medium, 11 low. And here, which is very useful, we've got a risk rating, so I can filter down once again. If I want to see within corporate development those extreme risks, I know there's 2 extreme risks there, which are in blue, but I can actually go into this area here and I can see that those 2 extreme risks are in currently ICT. The nitty-gritty is really within the risk detail. So within the report, you'll see that I've taken a snapshot of the matrix. So we're using a 5x5 matrix, which you can see on the right of the screen. And I tend to do a snapshot, take that matrix, and put it in the report. So if I look at, as Mike said, if I look at corporate development, so currently the view on the right shows you the position as a council as a whole. If I look at corporate development, the matrix on the right will automatically change to represent the current position now, live, as in corporate development. So still telling me, as you see, there's 2 extreme risks, and there's a number of high risks, 6 and 8, 21, I believe. So if I click down to assurance, which is my area, work with Mark, within assurance now it's showing the number of risks within insurance, but more importantly, if I want to say now what I want to look at, focus now on the high risks, because the risks in front of you today are the exception report, those risks which are scored extreme or high level. So I can just click onto high there, and you can see there's the 3 risks there which are currently high. But if I scroll down, the detail is here, and I can actually hover over that, and it provides the management update. As I said, all this information is currently being pulled from the SharePoint page, and I got a direct link here to the risk registers within SharePoint, where all the council risks are held by directorate, service area, and team. It's made my job so much easier when I'm presenting, well, creating these reports, putting all the information together, because I can actually sort of do a screen dump from the site as a whole. An example, I've just very recently updated the performance report for ordinance and governance to be considered on the 11th of November, and you can see how I've pulled that together just by saying, look, pulling out a snapshot, the matrices, the number of risks which are currently open, and the relevant RAG ratings, together with direct links to those extreme links in that service area. Then I should stop sharing my screen. That was a very quick tour, but hopefully that helps and it gives you an overview of how we're using a dashboard and how much easier it is for us all to produce reports and provide information to officers. This approach will also be considered at the directorate management teams, who get a separate report and they can focus, get into the nitty-gritty, got under the bonnet of the risk and look at it in more detail. I'll hand over back to Mark. If there's any questions, I can sort of come back in. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Trotter. Mark, do you have anything to add at this point?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, David, for that demonstration. Nothing really to add, Chair, but hopefully, I mean, if people do have any queries on how to access the dashboard, I'm sure David would be more than happy to help members of the committee with that.
Thank you, Mr. Eyre. So, members, this is the first time that you've seen this. It's another dashboard to get used to and to learn how to use, which you enjoy. It's obviously a pretty extensive piece of work that's in our report here. Now, because I'm aware that this is the first time that we've seen this, what I'm suggesting from the chair is that I've spoken to the officers already, that we have an informal meeting like we did with the performance dashboard, and we have an informal meeting as a single item agenda, and the officers take us through it in detail. Am I up with that? Because this is going to be something that's going to be returning to us on a regular basis, like the performance dashboard, that we can then drill down into. Is everyone content with that? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, I think if we arrange that outside of this meeting, Mr. Eyre, we'll arrange an informal meeting with the members of the committee and with you as the officers so that we can have a really exploratory look at it. Thank you. I've got Councillor Shortell first, then Councillor Roberts, then Councillor Took.
Which can be used and loaded onto our screens.
As I understand, it will be available in SharePoint, Mr. Eyre?
So both the dashboard and the SharePoint risk register, they should, I believe, I'm not 100% on the technology, but I think you should be able to easily access it on your screen. Likewise, I think it should work on mobile phones or any form of technology. You can link to it, yeah.
Councillor Roberts?
I think that was my point, is could we have a note round to say how to get on it, please?
Okay, so
it's an excellent dashboard. There's a lot of information in there. Information, and again, this, because if you combine this dashboard with the other dashboards that we're looking at, and there's a lot of information, and it needs to be kept up to date. And I think we've picked up before that some of the figures that we're getting on these dashboards are legacy figures where they're not necessarily up to date. I mean, there was one I spotted on the report here where we've got a driver, we're talking about on page, what is it, page 52 of the report. It talks about driver shortages right at the top. Capacity within our supply chain is reduced. By Christmas 21, it is expected that. I'd quite like to know what's happened after Christmas 21. So it's just keeping these things updated, and that's a heck of a lot of work for whoever's doing it. So we must get up-to-date data, because otherwise we're looking at wrong information, and it's important. So it's not just me trying to be pedantic. It is important that the information is accurate, and we need to be sure that it is. And I wish you every good luck in making sure of that, because it's a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Took. It's a point well made. As you rightly say, it came up with the performance dashboard as well. And I think with the performance dashboard, there's a certain period within the month when it is updated. I don't know if this risk dashboard is the same, and I wonder whether or not the two would be sort of in sync with one another. if we're half a month out, then as members in the committee, we're going to be looking at one dashboard with one piece of figures to it, and the other dashboard with a different set of information to it. If we're able to run in alignment with one another, it would be ideal. Mr. Eyre, and then I got Mr. Trotter.
Thanks, Chair. It's certainly one of the things that David will do is ahead of the committees receiving the paper, he will go out to all of the risk owners to ask that they make sure that they are updating their risks. And sort of thinking a little bit about the difference between the role of this committee and the Audit and Governance Committee, something that Audit and Governance were very keen to see on their sort of side a bit about having that assurance around the framework itself. We built into the dashboard something that monitors how regularly the risks are actually reviewed and updated. So as a corporate service, we can identify areas where we need to go in and give some more focus. But likewise, the directors and the directorates themselves that actually own those risks can easily get that view of those risks within their own area that have not been reviewed for some time. In terms of the other point about alignment with performance, we are looking at the potential for risk management to actually move from outside of my area into the performance area, which immediately starts to bring a greater alignment anyway between those two processes. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Eyre, that's helpful. Mr. Trotter, I believe you want to come back?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I was going to add that we have actually got a facility within the BI dashboard that shows us the percentage of risks which have not been updated by required time. And we've got this skill now and ability to go in there and see what those risks are, and we can chase the officers and sort of give them a helpful hand to suggest that they update those risks and be very helpful and accommodating. Also, within the report you're considering today, there are direct links to both the SharePoint page and the dashboard. And I'm always contactable. Anyone can email me, ring me, and I can talk them through the process and show them the relevant links. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Trotter. Are you happy with that, Councillor Took?
Yes, yeah, I'm happy. I think there's a lot of work gone into these, and they are excellent dashboards, both the performance and the risk. But simple point, they must be kept up to date, otherwise we're floundering in the dark. So, and there are lagging indicators as well. So there are indicators that are only updated every few months, or every 6 months, or every year, and that makes it difficult. But what we need to know is really when this data was last updated, so we can look at when we're looking at a risk that has been mitigated, when that data is from. If it's from last month, quite happy. If it's from a year ago, it doesn't tell me anything. So that's my simple plea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Took. Mr. Eyre.
Yes, certainly something that's built into both the dashboard and actually on the report as well. It does indicate on there when that risk was last reviewed on the right hand side of each of the risk matrices. I guess where it slightly differs from the performance area is that the risk registry is a live document. So the onus really is on each of the individual risk owners as and when there's any change to that risk position to update it as and when, effectively. So we will have a prompt for a periodic update, which for high and extreme risks is at least once every quarter. But actually, if there's something that changes that risk position in between those times, the officer should actually be making the change at that point in time. Thank you.
Okay, members, so you've seen the recommendation that's in the report, but as I've already mentioned from the chair, my suggestion is that we meet informally with the officers to be taken through that dashboard in detail, okay, which I think I've got agreement on. Thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item 9. Oh, thank you, Mr. Eyre, sorry. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Trotter, for coming today and for putting that in front of us. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I move to agenda item 9, Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee Forward Plan. To note items for the next meeting in November 2022, and Ms. Watson is to run us through it. Ms. Watson.
Okay, just to quickly move through the items coming up at your next meeting. You've got a look at the Phase 2 parking transformation review. This is some recommendations that were agreed by Cabinet in November last year. So you're going to be having a look at how things are going in that area. Update on property strategy and asset management plan, I understand, is coming to that meeting. Your regular look at the performance dashboard is also coming up at that meeting. And a biannual report on the climate and ecological emergency strategy. And then just to note, there was one item that was added since your last meeting. This is a look at the commercialisation transformation programme. And what you're going to get at the November meeting is an overview of that programme and the 4 key themes. And then the proposal, depending on how you feel about it, is to do a couple of further pieces of work on that, focusing in on some specific areas. But that's something for you to think about when you actually get that item in November. So I think that's probably as far as I'll go with that. The rest of it is just as it comes.
Any comment from any member? Are we content with that? If we're content, I'll move on. Yeah, thank you. So if we move on to agenda item 10. The Cabinet Forward Plan and Decisions. Ms Watson, to run us through that, please.
I don't propose to go through the decisions or the Cabinet Forward Plan in any detail. They're there for you to review, but just a reminder of why you have them on your on your agenda. They're there so that you can see what's coming up that the Cabinet's going to be taking decisions on, and if there's anything there that you might want to look at a period after implementation. Same for the decisions made at forthcoming meetings. Is there anything that Cabinet have taken a decision on that you might want to take a look at a few months or a year down the line? So that's there for you to review and comment on as necessary.
Okay, members, if we will be having an informal meeting to work out a forward plan, so I'm happy for members to mention anything to do with the Cabinet Forward Plan at that point in time. If you want to move on, I'm content with that. Yes. Okay, I'll move to agenda item 11, urgent items, of which there aren't any, and agenda item 12, exempt business, of which we have one item for exempt business. So I would like a proposer and a seconder, please, to confirm that we move into exempt business, and we will pause the video stream to allow the public gallery to be cleared. Thank you, Councillor Shortell. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Roberts. All in favour? Thank you. And we'll just adjourn for 5 minutes. Thank you.